Joining us for the third webinar in our webinar series, Top Challenges and Best Advice for Working in the Legislative Environment. My name is Angela Andrews. I work in the Legislative Management Department and am part of the Young and New Professionals Organizing Committee here at NCSL. And I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. This webinar is titled, Moving On Up, Advancement, Promotion, and Lateral Movement, and we'll discuss tips and strategies for advancement in the legislature, including lateral movement. A few housekeeping items before we introduce our speakers. These webinars are designed to be short and informative. The webinar will last 15 to 20 minutes and will be followed by question and answers. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the chat box on the right side of your screen. And finally, these webinars will be recorded and posted on the NCSL website. We are lucky to have two enthusiastic legislative staffers with us today. Chuck Truesdale, Legislative Fiscal Analyst with the Kentucky General Assembly, and Lindsay Grovum, Chief Clerk of the Montana House of Representatives. Both have advanced their own legislative careers and will have valuable information to share about their own successes and challenges. We'll hear from each of them about their career path and ask them to answer a few questions and share some tips about advancing in the legislature. Finally, we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So let's get started. Chuck, tell us about your path to serving as a legislative fiscal analyst in the Kentucky General Assembly.
Thanks, Angela. I came into legislative service in 2003 at the age of 25. I had a journalism background, and so I entered into our public information office, and I spent 8 years there as a speechwriter and a media relations assistant. And like a lot of folks in my generation, I started to suffer after about 8 years, actually before that, from what I call career ADHD. You know, I was getting restless. I needed a new challenge. I needed just something different because I was sort of getting bored with what I'd been doing. And not to mention that the fact that the last decade or so hadn't been the best for employee raises. And so I knew that if I wanted to get a raise, if I wanted to make more money, I needed to move into a higher salary position. Now, the problem was my boss was a legislative lifer, and he had a long way to go to retirement, so it's not like a near-term promotion was going to be happening. So I could have gotten a job somewhere else in my chosen field, but I love the legislative branch. I could have taken a job, I suppose, in the executive branch, but I'm really a legislative creature. So I decided to find another job within the legislature. And so with the blessing of my boss, who knew that he would probably lose me because of what he was endorsing, I went back to school to get a master's degree part-time. So I went every day after work, which especially during legislative sessions was not the easiest thing to do. I had the idea of joining one of our committee staff, although we have about a dozen different committees, and so I wasn't sure which one I was most interested in. But I knew a lot of our committee staff administrators fairly well because of the job I had at the time, so I felt confident in which areas I liked best and which managers I would like to work for. At the same time, I made a point to volunteer for any type of collaborative work within the agency, any non-PR assignment that became available. Because of that, I got involved in the bill drafting process and our bill drafting software because I'd been asked to help draft memorial resolutions, honorary resolutions. That in a lot of legislatures, that's a natural part of that job, but in our office, we had always shunned resolution type work in the past. So I was sort of the odd duck in our office being so enthusiastic to help out. But that gave me an in with committee staff because I had to attend all of the bill drafting meetings and that sort of thing, parliamentary procedures and what have you. And so it helped me make a lot of connections. And as it turned out, while I was in grad school, I fell in love with crunching numbers. I'd always been good at math. I'd always been sort of a spreadsheet guy, but it had never translated into sort of the career field that I wanted to do. However, one day I was talking to our budget director, and I had mentioned that I was interested in moving somewhere else in the agency, and he asked to take a look at my master's thesis. And about 6 months after I had gotten my master's, after sort of rejecting a few different job openings that I might have been interested in applying for, I decided not to. A job opened on the budget staff. I applied for that and was offered. Technically, if you look at sort of the organizational chart, it was a lateral move. But I'm very happy with my job. I think the job I have right now is probably the most fun in the agency. A lot of people would say I'm a nerd and they would disagree with me, but I love the new job. I got a nice raise out of it, and I couldn't be happier. And a lot of that would not have happened if I hadn't sort of thrown myself out there in trying to make things happen. And that's my story.
Thank you, Chuck. Now, Lindsay, tell us how you were appointed as Chief Clerk of the Montana House of Representatives.
Thank you, Angela, and hello, everyone. As you all just heard, I'm working for the Montana legislature, which is one of the few states still holding biennial sessions. My background prior to catching the legislative bug was actually in the landscaping industry, where I managed landscape nurseries, started my own design and gardening business, and my first legislative session was almost 10 years ago in 2005. I was in the word processing office, typing press releases, correspondence, editing minutes, and I was promoted to overseeing that word processing department the following session. And it was at that time that the idea first hit me that becoming Chief Clerk of the House is definitely becoming a long-term dream of mine. I worked as the second assistant to the Secretary of the Senate for one session prior to serving in the House Chief Clerk's office, and a final promotion, and definitely the realization of a sought-after dream, came with the appointment of Chief Clerk of the House for the 2013 legislative session.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you for sharing your career path. Now it's time to ask you both a few questions about your advancement. To get started, you both explained your career path and advancement in the legislature. Do you have any advice for our listeners about how they can initiate their own advancement? Chuck, can you start?
Sure. I guess my first piece of advice is to get the job you want, you have to excel at the job you have. Nobody's going to give you a chance to do something different if you're not already being trusted to do a good job at what you're already doing. So that's obviously the sort of obvious advice I think most people would give. The second is you may not think of yourself as a political creature. You're not a political person, but we do work in the political world, and so you have to be cognizant of that. Make a diverse set of friends across the legislative branch, not just in terms of legislators, because I don't believe in being a suck-up, but make friends across the different areas of your agency. You're going to find out things, the way things operate in different areas of your agency. Advance notice that a job may be coming available on a committee staff or in some other department that you wouldn't have known about otherwise. We're one of those agencies that tends to, by the time a job becomes available, it's already been filled because the manager already had an idea of who they wanted to get. So you need to be sort of proactive in finding out about those things. And finally, sort of be flexible. There's a lot of folks who say, that's not my job, don't ask me to do that. And I think that's the worst thing you can do if you're wanting to get promoted or take on a new career path, because you have to be flexible. You have to be known as the person who's a team player who sees themselves as part of the larger institution and not just their little silo within the agency.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and also a couple other points. Definitely carry yourself with confidence and be organized, professional, and calm under pressure. Become the person that management calls on and knows that they will have every confidence that you will be a success in whatever you do. And another idea is top-of-mind awareness is a popular marketing term, but it can be used in this situation as well. If you're tucked away in your office doing a fabulous job, that's great. But if you're looking to advance to another position, you need to get noticed. You need to be taking measures to ensure that you're the one that comes to mind when decision makers are looking to fill that position.
Sounds great. Now on to another topic, professional development and cross-training. Did either of you participate in any professional development or cross-training that helped with your advancement? Lindsay, do you want to start?
Yeah, you bet. I would say cross-training was definitely vital in my situation. Once I knew where I wanted to go, I offered myself as a floater for various positions, which included helping out in the Chief Clerk's office whenever needed. While delivering fiscal notes, I was able to learn the budget and fiscal note process. While down in the printing office, I heard about the processes that take place there, and just taking advantage of every opportunity to learn every step a bill takes from original concept to completion. I also found and studied any materials I could get my hands on. I read operation manuals for the Chief Clerk's office, studied the legislative rules, took them home, read them at night, watched floor sessions, and offered to help out in the chief clerk's office whenever needed. I would definitely advise that before you make known the position that you want, learn it and know exactly what you're talking about.
That's a lot of what I would say as well, Lindsay. You know, I'm sort of you need to be a sponge, soaking up information from all across the spectrum of your agency, because you never know what you might take an interest in that you hadn't been exposed to yet. The second thing in terms of cross-training and professional development that I always made an effort to do was when I attended conferences, most especially the NCSL Legislative Summit, there are so many different offerings to go to. I would make sure that I went to some things that interested me, not just in my particular area, my department, as it were. And that had it was a sort of a double whammy. One, I learned new information about a field that might interest me, and the second is there was a good chance that there were other staffers from my agency in that session, and I could network with them, ask them questions, show my interest in sort of expanding my horizons, and that's sort of how they began to know me as somebody who, oh, he's not just a media relations guy, he's somebody who actually has wider interest, and we might be able to use him in our area somewhere down the road, and that's obviously a good reputation to have. One other thing to take advantage of is, I think most legislative agencies have a sort of professional development track. They'll have brown bag sessions, that sort of thing, but also take a wider look at your state government as a whole. There's a lot of things that the executive branch will offer that I think legislative staffers think, well, those don't apply to me because we're a separate branch, but it never hurts to ask. And in a lot of cases, I think you'll be enthusiastically encouraged to take part in those things. And once again, that widens your network of people, of contacts, and you never know how that might benefit you down the road.
Thanks, Chuck. And thanks for sharing both of your opinions about the value of professional development and cross-training. Now to talk about strategic career planning. What strategy or strategies did you use for setting your career path? Chuck?
Well, the first thing I did was, I used grad school as sort of a jumping off point. Most people, when you're already into your career, once you're out of at least your bachelor's, or if you've already got your master's, you sort of think you're set, you're done with school. And I decided to learn, sort of a new skill set as I was going into my master's program. A more broadly applicable thing, I think, though, is I took advantage of the job that I had with all the contacts I could make. Every time I had to talk to a legislator, I would learn more about what their interests were, what they thought they needed from the legislative agency as a whole. And one thing I've noticed about lawmakers is that if you prove yourself adept at one thing, legislators tend to glom on to one person that they trust. And regardless of whether that's your area or not, they're going to keep going back to you to ask you to do things for them. And once again, don't say, well, that's not my job. Here's a person you need to get contact. Try to help out. Be as helpful as you can, because legislators, and once again, I'm not a big fan of sucking up to folks, but it never hurts to have people know this is a guy, this is a lady who can be trusted, and this is somebody that we can really trust, once again, to do what we need them to do, whether it's really their area or not. And so, I don't know that it's, I've only made lateral movements within my agency, but I have a feeling, just from talking to legislators, that those are the sort of people they look to promote down the road, people that they know can handle larger assignments than what they already have to handle.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice. I would say that as soon as I knew my long-term goal of becoming clerk, I made a mental list of key work experiences and skills that would benefit my plan of achieving that goal. I worked in various positions which helped me gain insight and knowledge in numerous areas, and each one was also an opportunity to network with a different group of staff and legislators, which furthered my knowledge of the legislative process. In addition to that, I was looking at where I was at and where I wanted to go, obtaining the tools needed to accomplish that. I began networking with the key decision makers who make the decisions on who to hire, find out who's going to make that decision, and when it came to the point of being appointed a new clerk, I had already built that vital relationship.
Thank you. Let's move on to talk about challenges with advancement. What challenges, if any, have you experienced, either prior to your advancement or after? Lindsay?
I would say that one challenge that comes to mind is staying ahead of the game and not getting caught off guard. When leadership comes to me regarding a bill or an issue, I need to know what's going on or coming down the pipeline ahead of time. In order to be prepared for this, I follow bill status pretty closely, try to stay on top of where the bills are at in the process so I can have a quick answer for them. I also try to track social media and the press, and I'm always trying to watch and listen to everything going on. I would say do what you can, anything you can, to stay educated on what's going on in the legislature so you can be a good resource for your management team.
That sounds very, very familiar in terms of trying to stay ahead of the game. Because a lot of times you may be the only person who can make connections between other areas and what you're already doing. And that can prove useful for the people you work for. One thing that I've found is that, I've been in this job for about 2.5 years now, and I still encounter legislators who think that I'm still a speechwriter, who still think that I do the media relations. And they'll call me up saying, I need something, and it relates to my old job. And of course, I'm happy to help. I will pass it along. But there's still this silo effect of people see you as only fitting into one thing. And once they've gotten into their head that you are the person we count on for this area of legislative service, it's hard to get out of that. And so the work never ends. You want to broaden your horizon so you can move into that new job. But to some degree, that old job is never going to leave you. You're always going to be sort of seen as that one person. And I won't say I've had a rough time of it, but it's a continual challenge trying to remind folks that I don't do that job anymore. Here's what else I do now. And a lot of folks, I have a lot of legislators, I don't know why, say, so you're working in the governor's budget office now, right? And I'm like, no, I still work for you. I'm just in the legislative budget office. Well, really, I had no idea. I don't see you anymore. Well, that's because my new job entails different responsibilities. And so it's, in a way, you have to train the legislators and the other people in your agency to see you differently, even after you've moved around a little bit.
Thank you. And finally, do either of you have any tips for other young and new legislative professionals that are determining their career path and seeking to advance in the legislature? Chuck?
It almost seems like we've covered this already, but some things that bear repeating. Take the extra time, that extra 5 minutes if you have it. And I know times get hectic during a legislative session especially. Take that extra 5 minutes to double check your work, make sure there are no typos, make sure that it reflects all the knowledge that you wanted to put in there, you haven't left anything out. Because once again, you have to excel at the job you have, I think, to be rewarded with further opportunities. And 5 minutes can make all the difference in the world. And that's a lesson I'm still learning because I want to hurry up and get my work out the door. And I'm constantly learning that a little extra time, a little extra effort goes a long way. And then also, you can never be prepared enough. Study, study, study. I mean, I think like a lot of legislatures, we have a lot of downtime and a lot of uptime. It's a hurry up and wait type of deal. And there's a lot of things you can do during that downtime, studying on bills, researching the statutes, history, what have you, that gives you that little extra sort of shine because you never know when you're going to be called upon to provide that information that most people would say, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. And if you can provide that information because you have it on the top of your head because you knew this might come up, people tend to think of you differently because you're the star then. Actually, my nickname around our office is Rain Man because they ask what a certain number might be, and I know it. And it's not because I have a gift for numbers or anything. It's because I anticipated that the question would come up, and I wrote it down. And so, I don't know that being known as Rain Man is necessarily a positive thing, but it's definitely something that people know if they need a number, they can come to me, and there's a good chance they're going to get the information they're looking for.
That's really good advice. Staying one head of everybody on the game. That's great. I would say, yeah, once again, I mean, I try, if I hear someone ask a question to someone else and I realize I wouldn't have had the answer if they approached me with that, I, jot it down and make sure that when I get a chance, I'm seeking the answer out because you never know. Somebody's going to ask you that same question down the road. My tips, I would say decide where you want to go in your career and don't let anything stop you from getting there. And also sell yourself through your actions. Competency, professionalism, and confidence will go a long way.
Thanks, Chuck and Lindsay, for sharing your strategies, tips, and challenges for advancement in the legislature. We now have a few questions in the chat box that we will answer. For our attendees, don't forget, if you have a question, please type it in the chat box on the right-hand side. So the first question to both of you is, my office does not currently offer assistance for continuing education or tuition assistance. How can I further my training and skill development on my own? Chuck?
I would say that, our office oftentimes does not offer tuition assistance or what have you. However, there are a lot of opportunities out there, this being one of them. NCSL provides a lot of webinars. There are other professional organizations that offer professional development. You have to be diligent, I think, to seek out that sort of thing. A lot of times things will be sent to you, and that's great, but you can't rely on somebody saying, hey, this is a great seminar, you should attend. Take advantage, and in your downtime, Google sort of things in your professional area, your area of expertise, things that you're interested in, and you'd be surprised what will pop up on your screen. Take advantage of anything you can. Not everything comes with a cost, I would say.
Yeah, I would say Google, definitely. Also, your community colleges offer a lot of professional development seminars and opportunities in that realm. The chamber professional groups offer a huge resource for excelling. You don't need money. Take advantage of every online or community opportunity you have to further your education.
Thank you. Another question that's come in is talking about mentors, and it's something that you both kind of briefly mentioned, but let's go into more detail. And can you talk about the role of mentors in helping you identify goals and to help you advance your career? Lindsay, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, you bet. I worked for the former chief clerk of the House for my first few sessions, and she had been there for quite a few years. So you could say she was a mentor, just watching her and learning a lot from her role as the clerk. So yeah, I think, finding somebody who's got the wisdom and been there before you to talk to about that role and guide you in the process is definitely instrumental.
I think there's one role that, we often think of mentors as somebody who can help you professionally, and that is certainly the case. But one thing that I noticed with the people that I sought out for advice, where they also had this institutional history. They had knowledge of what our agency was like 20 years ago. And that sort of gave me a larger idea of how the agency worked, how it used to work, how things have changed. And the thing that I noticed was not to rely on one particular mentor, because we all have our own points of view. Have a few different ones. Sometimes, the ones that get along, you're going to pick up the idea of who you can trust, whose advice you value. And I've found, at different points in my career, different people whose advice seemed more relevant to my needs and interests at that time. So don't limit yourself, but I think that you'll naturally find a mentor or multiple mentors if you sort of put yourself out there, volunteering for things. It comes up in the course of conversation a lot of times. You don't have to go to somebody and knock on their door and say, hey, could you teach me everything you know? That would be nice if it works that way, but I think it happens a lot organically if you become the sort of person who just wants to learn more about how to advance your career.
Great advice. Another question that came in is about the work-life balance, and you both mentioned about having flexibility and being flexible when working with legislators and other staff, the power of Google, being one step ahead of the game. But do you have any advice for maintaining a work-life balance while still trying to advance your careers? Lindsay, do you want to start with this one?
I have the perfect work-life balance. I'm completely single. Works great. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I think, balancing it, definitely in the evenings during a session it's impossible to balance work-life, but I don't know, focusing on work and excelling in where you want to go, but also making sure you leave it at the office and have your priorities straight, that, you know, when it's all said and done, your family and your loved ones mean so much more than any advanced promotion you can get in the legislature.
I sort of think of myself as having a great balance in that from January to April, there is no balance because I'm all work, and then the rest of the year pretty much I'm all myself. You know, I'm all about my personal life. I think it takes a certain sort of person to work in the legislative branch to begin with, because we do work crazy hours. And for those of us who, you know, who work in part-time legislatures, you know, it is sort of this concentrated period where you're all focused on work. I sort of think of it as the opposite of teacher's hours. I don't have the summer off. I just have to work hard during the winter. And my attitude is, what else am I going to be doing in the winter anyway? I don't ski. I don't go snowmobiling. I might as well be at work all this time. But I think the key is that you have to find a job within the legislature that allows you the work-life balance that you prefer. I work in the budget office. Our hours are much, much different than some of our statutory committees, where even when the legislature is in session, they pretty much have the same hours, 9 to 5 every day. And so if you find yourself wanting more free time, I think most legislatures have openings in certain areas that will allow you to do that. If you want to be sort of like me and you like to focus for 3 or 4 months out of the year where you have no life and you're focused on the legislative branch, most offices or most legislative agencies will have offices that do that as well. Not everybody's work-life balance is the same. You have to find the one that works for you. And I think most legislative branch agencies have enough variety of jobs that you can find what works for you in particular.
Wow. Well, thank you, Chuck and Lindsay, for taking for your valuable advice, and thank you for attendees for logging into today's webinar. We appreciate you taking the time, and we hope you enjoyed our webinar series, Top Challenges and Best Advice for Working in the Legislative Environment. Please know that this webinar and the other 2 webinars in the series will be archived. Also, be on the lookout for an evaluation about the series. We look forward to hearing your feedback and input, which will help us when developing future webinars for young and new legislative professionals. Also, please join the Young and New Legislative Professionals group at NCSL. You can visit us online at www.ncsl.org/YNP. Thank you, and have a great Friday.